Good morning, sir. How are things? Good. Sir, एक छोटा सा correction है from what you have written in the last class. This is, I think, the last paragraph, last but one paragraph. After burial practices, a clear indication of belief in supernatural had originated with Neanderthal. In Homo erectus, this is an unconfirmed cultural aspect due to the lack of such evidences. वहाँ तक ठीक है. There has to be a correction in the next statement. Regionally, Homo erectus in Africa is believed to have emerged from Homo ergaster. बाकी वो हटा दीजिए, the most evolved whatever. I repeat, regionally Homo erectus in Africa is believed to have evolved from, that is not into, evolved from Homo erectus, Homo ergaster. So sorry, I'm fumbling. Regionally, Homo erectus in Africa is believed to have evolved from Homo ergaster. ठीक है, full stop. बाकी वो हटा दें. The most evolved Homo erectus variant, you remove that. From there, the rest of the things stand. In the Skupin's map of human evolution, the time period between, I don't know what it is. Yeah, वहाँ सब ठीक है. Tomorrow, first 10-15 minutes, क्या चल रहा है? Tomorrow, phone भी चल रहा है साथ में. First 10-15 minutes, you will take a small test. Oh, Garima, you meet me after the class. And that will be an objective type test. Maybe I will show certain questions on the screen. If not, I am giving you the papers to you. Let's see. I mean, if at all that is possible, I will give you certain papers so that you will formally write down. Otherwise, I will show you the pictures. I'll show you the questions. You will be giving you the answers. Today we will be talking about something called Neanderthal man. That would bring us to almost the conclusion of fossil evidences. Once I do that, I will take you to the topics of race, racism. That's what my plan has been. So let us see how things will be. Did you check for certain additional informations that I shared with you? I think right now the number of topics that I have sent to you stands at about 22. I hope you are downloading the things and keeping with you so that later you will not complain that they are removed and you don't have access. Acha. In the last class, we were talking about erectus. There were time-wise differences, region-wise variations we have seen. So it was like somebody from Africa was there, somebody in. So if at all that question is asked, for example, geographical variants of Homo erectus, if that is the question, so you would be considering the three regions, that is Asia, Europe and Africa. Within Africa, two sub-regions, that is Southern Africa and Eastern Africa. Within Asia, it will be Peking man, Narmada man and then Javan man. Java is the most extreme eastern fossil we have found. And then intermittently we have Europe. Time periods also were being discussed. The same kind of time period you find in Southern Africa and several sites of Asia. You have younger evidences from Europe, that is 1.6 to 1 million years ago. And when it comes to the eastern part of Java, there also we see the very old evidences. I had to share something with you once I finish this. And there we were principally talking about one argument, that was whether ancestors of humans had come from Africa. What were the questions that were involved? And so it's like some people who were staunch believers in out of Africa theory, they had several things to offer. One is maybe and long back, before the arrival of Turkana Boy itself, the migration must have happened. Or maybe during the life of Erectus, the migration was happening. Or there's a third variant that can be that can incorporate the continental drift theory, wherein there is no physical migration as such, only the land itself was migrating from one place to the other, kind of things. That is one very potential question, sir. In your archaeology related test, this will definitely occur to you, so prepare very well for that. And we have seen several variants there. Certain names we have used. One is Homo heidelbergensis, that is nothing but that is European Homo erectus. In today's class, we will be talking about Neanderthal, and also we will have a word about somebody called Rhodesian man. But before that, why is it that people thought that Neanderthal was not the ancestors of genus of Homo sapiens? Initially, when they were writing linear evolution model, Neanderthalensis was considered to be ancestor of Homo sapiens. That is the reason why they had used the name Homo sapiens neanderthalensis. So if the examiner is asking you a question with this terminology, Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, he is in a way hinting you that he wants you to write about whether there is a consensus regarding whether Neanderthal is a human ancestor or not. See, if you are calling him Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, you clearly agree that this was somebody who was maybe a variant of Homo erectus, Homo sapiens himself. But then there were two basic problems with that. One was, you see this man to be having a cranial capacity more than Homo sapiens. That was challenging the existing general understanding that with evolution, cranial capacity has to constantly increase. But this man was an exception, where we find there is a gradual fall after Neanderthal. That was one challenge people were facing. Second thing was, there was a parallel existence of the fossil founds have proved that there was a parallel existence of Homo sapiens fossils, early Homo sapiens fossils, along with Neanderthalensis. So one other question that came to the mind of the people was, how is it possible that somebody who is surviving can be our ancestor? So during the same time period, if you are finding the fossils, during the same time period, if you are finding the fossils, they raised a question that you cannot perhaps coexist along with your ancestors. But of course, there were several people who challenged this idea. Is it not really possible that your ancestor also continues, and then some of your ancestors' relatives thought that, okay, I am better off being a Homo sapiens rather than continuing in my own form? But there are less people taking to that kind of an argument. So this question of whether Neanderthal is our ancestor or not still haunts. That is the reason why this has been an important question in archaeology, in fossil evidences, that is arguments related to status of Neanderthalensis in human evolution. Arguments related to Neanderthalensis and its status in the human evolution. Because you have come very close to Homo sapiens, there are so many variants they have unearthed by then itself, like Cro-Magnon was there and several other people were already excavated. Where exactly we should put this individual, that was a major issue. So I'll show you certain phylogenetic pictures. This was one of them, which is generally accepted now. Erectus gave rise to two people. One was Neanderthal, the other one was Homo sapiens. Sapiens continued, Neanderthal got extinct. Can I go? This is the other one. There's a difference between this and this. The question was whether Homo erectus took some time, and maybe perhaps after Homo erectus, are there any other fossils we still have to unearth? Based on that, this was the idea, this is the prevailing idea. We are leaving no chance, we are leaving nothing for chance, because there is a possibility that after Homo erectus, maybe there could be certain fossils before the actual line was divided. But earlier to this one, this existed. It's like all the Homo erectus were sitting in a conference one day deciding that, okay, we will go this way, some of us will go this way. It was not like that. This is what is accepted now, giving us a scope to think that maybe there is a possibility of some more fossils there. This anyway was one of the views. Homo erectus gave rise to two people. One of them killed the other, or one of them got killed, other continued. This was one of the early models. Homo erectus gave rise to Homo sapiens, Neanderthal man, and the modern fellow. So it all is something like this. You start with your hypotheses and then you'll try to find evidences of it. And then this is something else. So a continuation of this. This was something like a linear model. Homo sapiens, Neanderthal giving rise to Homo sapiens. So this model thinks that several variants have come after Neanderthal. One could have been Cro-Magnon, but later people found that this is nothing but early Homo sapiens. So this is also not accepted as of now. This is something that we don't consider at all. But I am showing you because for some time this was also believed to be true. This was a thinking when they have unearthed Cro-Magnon man, did not confirm that he was Homo sapiens. When Homo sapiens was considered to be somebody who was different from Cro-Magnon, then this picture was given. Later they found that this Homo erectus has given rise to Homo sapiens based on the regions. Certain characteristics, certain physical characteristics were attained by the individual. So these are the three names of Homo sapiens that you see in your syllabus. They are not two different species. They are actually within the same species, but then they have certain physical differences. I hope you understand. And these three, over a period of time, were understood as the originators of three popular races in the modern man. This was one more. This one is substituting Cro-Magnon with Rhodesian man. I have sent you one document called Dryopithecus, Sivapithecus, etc., etc. Small notes are written there. So from there you can actually take information related to Narmadensis. Sir, two questions I want you to prepare thoroughly. One is the regional variants of Homo erectus. The second one is the fossil men of India. The fossil men of India. When I am saying fossil men, I don't want you to write the details in that question about either Ramapithecus or Sivapithecus. Maybe perhaps you will say in the opening statement that these were also found, but you are mostly writing about Homo erectus. First one I said was regional variants of Homo erectus. The second one is fossil men of India. I'm going back again from here. We started from there. This is the most accepted one as of now. So put a star mark. This is what is followed now. This was followed with a modification. This was initially believed, but this is number 2 is modified as this and is followed. Mostly this is the one we are sticking to. This was there for some time popularly. Even today there are people who support this thing. Even today there are people who support this, who believe that Neanderthal was an ancestor of Homo sapiens. And this was there for some time, during which there was no clarity about whether Cro-Magnon was a Homo sapiens or not. And then this was also something that is not accepted today. Rhodesian man is seen as one of the archaic Homo sapiens. Rhodesian man is seen as one of the archaic Homo sapiens. In fact, with Rhodesian man, there are two problems. Some people call him a variant of advanced Homo erectus. Looking at his skull capacity, because it was nearing about 1400, so people also call him, maybe he was a Neanderthal. See, I am trying to talk about Rhodesian man. He is a controversial fellow for two reasons. One is, of course, his position in the evolutionary line, whether he is nothing but Neanderthal or whether he is an erectus of an advanced form. This was one. Second thing was that he was not explored by some archaeologist, but he was excavated by a miner in Rhodesia. And they were handed over to one archaeologist who was a controversial figure, the one who was an assistant of Dawson. So when Dawson was not trustworthy, people raised a question. People raised a question against the trustworthiness of this individual who was actually taking control of Rhodesian man and trying to preserve him and write a thesis about him. And this is the reason why till today Rhodesian man did not get his right position, his position in the evolutionary line. This is still considered to be a controversial case. And one third issue with Rhodesian man is there is a big hole. I mean, I'm not talking about foramen magnum. There is a hole in the skull, as if somebody must have pierced some object into the skull. It might have happened in an accident. I mean, when somebody was trying to work in the soil, this must have happened because that's primarily a mining region. This must have happened. Or maybe because we are all people who imagine too much in archaeology. It might also be that somebody intentionally must have violently killed him. That is one issue that has to be settled with him. But somehow, fortunately or unfortunately, because Dawson's student had picked this up, I think that is a primary reason, if not anything else. So this makes me think occasionally that even if we are talking about something like a scientific discipline, of course fossil evidences are a scientific discipline. Even in the scientific disciplines, not everything is rational. You go by the trust. You go by, it's as simple as even in the most modern economics, everything will not go on the principles of the so-called profit maximization or things like that. If that was the case, why should the share values fall when a government comes which is not so very trustworthy, or people do not have confidence in the government? Here there is something like a feel that you have. There is an opinion. So somebody had done a mistake a long time back, and because his student was associated, this thing had. Before I continue with that, there was something in the newspaper, 7th of August, I think today, 7th of August, my own city of Hyderabad, there is some bone evidence found, first bone jewels in India. I think this is a fit case for you to be mentioned in the exam. Generally, we wait for a confirmation from the organizations such as Archaeological Survey of India, tests to be conducted, and then formally decided that, okay, this is what must be belonging to so and so time period, etc. But maybe because this makes me write about my own place in the archaeological record, I would want to hurry on that. So maybe this you can give as whenever, because every time we are failing here, we are always saying that there are no bone evidences. It's like demeaning ourselves continuously. So you may say that this could be one of the credible informations. Of course, this is only 4,000 years ago, not very too long ago also. So 4,000 in the sense we have come to the modern man. So you may perhaps say at one place in your writing that see the bone evidences we don't have of very long time back. At so and so place we have found bone jewelry for the first time. Confirmation from CCMB is awaited. And I really loved this one. A symbolic study, you can say. It's not that the gold winner is being receiving, gold winner is not receiving that kind of respect there. This shows the kind of respect that he might be commanding, irrespective of the race issues that are involved, irrespective of the lower medal that he had received. This communicates a lot. So don't anytime think that numbers are everything. Every time don't think that rank number 1 is superior. Yeah, and on page number 4, there is something about Center for Buddhist Studies. Center for Buddhist Studies in Khammam district. Center for Buddhist Studies. So we will be coming back on this when we do Buddhism. So and I think somewhere in today's paper there was something like a rubber boat on which people are migrating from a country to the other. I was thinking how blessed we are We need not have to look for rubber boats like that to flee your countries. Now, let me continue from here. This also runs into a huge time set. That's a basic classification. Based on time period, if Neanderthal has to be categorized. If you could see there, we find evidences even during the early Homo erectus. So when I'm saying that it is about 300,000 years, that was also a time when erectus was existing. Of course, the numbers of such fossils are very, very less, but then there's a possibility that we might get many more eventually. We should not leave anything for a doubt. This is based on a classification that is to do with the time periods, popularly given by Bowley. So I think in the next 1 week or 10 days, we will be getting the name of Bowley again and again. Sir, if the question is phylogenetic status of Neanderthal, you try to explain the sequences that are given to you. Say which is the most accepted one, and which is the one that is challenged the most. So we will largely be writing about Neanderthal in today's class, and then I will also discuss a bit about one concept called ethnoarchaeology. Can I go? There are a good number of sites and specimens that we have found. But then I would straight away want to start with that. Those are the two categorizations that we see. The first one is about the classical Neanderthal, La Chapelle man. You can look at your syllabus. It talks about classical and progressive Neanderthal. All those first ones we call them classical. The second one, otherwise called Mount Caramel man. I have used this word La Moustier earlier also, if you could recall. Where? Middle Paleolithic. One can guess actually when we are talking about Neanderthal, possibly it could be Middle Paleolithic only. Sometime back there was also this question comment on the disappearance of Neanderthal. So you must have understood that there's so much of imagination that goes in this discipline. There's so much of imagination. The small evidence that we find, we try to apply several techniques if at all they were existing at that time. Or we try to preserve it for some techniques to be invented in the future, and this particular specimen would once again come for an evaluation. But there's a lot of imagination. Many questions remain unanswered. At many places you must have felt in the class that things are not very crystal clear. You're not wrong in thinking that way, because we are trying to build a story with whatever small dots that we are getting. That is neither your fault nor my fault. I cannot add my own specimens to construct a story. So you will have to understand that, see, it is not my weakness that I could not give you a comprehensive thing. I was only a mediator, I was only a voice of the discipline from where I am trying to tell you this is what has been the views of different people. Millions of years of stories cannot be constructed with a handful of evidences. All the more so for India. So we'll start from here. Now, before you start writing, you'll have to understand this. In the early fossils, Astrolo was there with a bent knee posture, bent feet posture. They established that he had that kind of a walk. There was nothing wrong with him. Suddenly they found a fossil in La Chapelle. That's an old man's fossil. And he had the feet that was bent. I mean, bones were bent. Suddenly there was a big question. Was it that the evolution was going backward? Because it was very much evidence from the skull that it was so very advanced when compared to all other fossils that people had encountered. We have finished about 120 years, 160 years of discovery of Neanderthal. So all those occasions were celebrated properly by UPSC. 150 years there was a question. These are all celebrations which you should not miss out. This year we are actually looking for one other question related to Neanderthal, especially on the controversies, because new sites have come. Not very interestingly, new information was revealed, but then new sites have come. Anything that is added, maybe it may add to the controversy or it may add to the clarity. So when La Chapelle man came, people were confused about looking at the feet, and later they found several other sites nearby. They found similar skulls, but later they examined closely the disease-ridden old man, arthritis, and then they had a happy breathe. But on the other hand, they found in certain other regions, you could see Israel, Iraq, those regions, people found somebody with the same postcranial features, but cranium being different. See, so far things were happening this way, though it's a recalling for us. We have seen in the early times that many of the differences were occurring in the postcranial features, especially in the feet structure. But as we were coming close, as we were going into Homo erectus, we got a confirmation that, okay, fine, now we have somebody who stood erect. It's only that there is a way forward now. Somebody with less or cranial features or not so very evolved cranial features would eventually evolve into Homo sapiens. This was what the idea. But suddenly this man comes in between. One problem he creates was the arthritic feet. By the time we could come out of it, we started finding that this man was having a higher cranial capacity than the humans. Was it that somebody with higher cranial capacity was giving rise to the next fellow who was having a lesser one? This was once again a challenge. Then people thought that maybe perhaps these two are different variants. He may not be our ancestor. This man could have been a parallel cousin of us. Both of us must have come from erectus in two different species. And immediately there comes another controversy. The controversy is somebody with the same postcranial features, but cranial features were different. And those fellows were much closer to Homo sapiens in terms of the facial features, etc. Then people thought that maybe the classical fellows were ancient fellows, meaning the one with bigger cranial capacity were the old fellows when compared to the ones with the cranial capacity that is near to the humans. They had to get a confirmation from, once again, proper dating. See, everything said and done, Neanderthal offers us a very beautiful opportunity. When compared to all other human fossils that archaeologists were studying, this was one pre-Homo sapiens fellow from whom they could extract DNA samples. And in the Homo sapiens, there were several. There is Cro-Magnon, there is a Grimaldi fellow. From them also we could extract the DNA. Now what is happening is they are trying to compare these DNAs across the so-called species in order to know what was the age of these DNA samples, so that you can properly come to a conclusion about who was the older fellow, who must have been much closer to the other individual. So if a question is asked in Neanderthal, it could be like one, that is the status in the phylogeny of the Homo sapiens. The second one could be the physical characteristics based on classical and evolved, or classical and modern Neanderthal man. He can give the variants separately. In the exam, Mount Carmel man was asked separately, La Chapelle was asked separately. The third one is, what could be the reasons for the disappearance of Neanderthal? By now, in different discussions, I have mentioned this disappearance of Neanderthal. At one point of time, we said that maybe he was not somebody who could leave his habitat and try to explore the other regions. When his region was becoming cold, what could have been sensible for him was get out of the region and try to explore more. That he did not do. Maybe within that kind of extreme climatic conditions, he could not survive and eventually died out. This could be one reason. Second, we said, was maybe perhaps the contemporary Homo sapiens, who was more evolved, must have eliminated him. There are some people who raise a question that how is it really possible that one species totally killing the other species? I don't think that's a valid question. How many species we must have killed out? Maybe possible. There is a third argument which says that these two people, that is sapiens and Neanderthal, were almost depending on the same kind of food sources. So there was a competition. In that competition, it must have happened that sapiens was more experimental, more evolved, and hence he was able to get a big cake of it, and then the other fellow could not. He eventually must have died out of starvation, etc. This third view can be considered true because not a single fossil of Neanderthal confirmed that they lived beyond the age of 40 years. It must have been possible that there was not much of a food source available. There were so many infant burials found in Neanderthal. So this could be quite possible that they were having a competition and hence he must have died. Those were three very popular. And then there is one very conventional kind of a thing. One group says that nothing of that kind. Neanderthal had eventually become Homo sapiens, which is actually given a different kind of a picture by some people who do not want Neanderthal as their ancestor. It's like, you're choosing your parent, kind of. I don't want you to be my parent, kind of a thing. These are the kind of questions. Don't look gloomy. You make me sad by looking like that. Now let me give you some information so that you can start to write. Keep writing, sir. जी सर, जी सर. कब का था? No, I did not see still. I'll come back on that tomorrow. I was only celebrating my first page. Got busy with that. Keep writing, sir. Neanderthalensis which according to a few is a species different from Homo sapiens, presented a confusion in the latest phases of human evolution. In the latest phases of human evolution. Though there are fossils of Neanderthal dating back to about 300,000 years, based on the volume available, and confirmed, it is popularly agreed to belong to less than 200,000 years ago. The first fossil finds of Neanderthal was from Gibraltar in 1848. Keep writing about some of the sites. Most important evidence of him was from Germany, from the site of La Chapelle aux Saints, that was studied by Bowley. This fossil initially gave rise to the discussions of a reverse trend in evolution, primarily due to its post-cranial features. The evidences from Mount Carmel and Galilee from Palestine, several French sites yielded another variant of Neanderthal. Right aside head there. Physical features. Based on the skull features, Neanderthal is divided into number one, classical Neanderthal or La Chapelle man belonging to Western Europe. Secondly, progressive or Mount Caramel Neanderthal. Keep writing that. The early evidences of Bowley questioned perfect bipedalism of Neanderthal. But after 1990s, the DNA examinations confirmed the reasons for imperfect bipedalism of La Chapelle man. Keeping this characteristic aside, the availability of a large number of classical Neanderthal fossils indicated the following. Write down the skull features there. Cranial capacity about 1600 cc. Keep writing in bullet points. Receding forehead in spite of higher cranial capacity compared to Homo sapiens with protruding occipital region, OCCIPUTAL, protruding occipital region, forming a bun-like structure. Supraorbital ridges forming a continuous bony feature, though the ridge is less robust compared to Homo erectus. Fourthly, incisors of most of the adult fossils seem to have been worn out seem to have been worn out, that must have been due to holding heavy objects with the front teeth. Continue writing there. Bowley compares this feature with that of Eskimos who drag the weights tied to the ropes as in the icy continent, they cannot solely depend on hands for carrying loads. I hope you understand. Hands, they actually use the sticks so that they can walk, and they are actually having the entire load at their back, and with the ropes they are tying the weight at the back, they are dragging it with their teeth. So it is a common characteristic in the Eskimos that the front teeth are worn out. Similar thing, because these are also the people, Neanderthal were also the people who, classical Neanderthal were the people who lived in the icy regions. This might possibly, keep writing there. Nostrils were broader and larger. Compared to humans, especially the Caucasoid racial stocks. Keep writing the points. Larger and stronger lower jaw, with a perfect evidence of chin. The roughness of the skull, that is the facial bones, indicates muscular attachments that help in facial expressions, or gestures. Postcranial features. We are writing about classical Neanderthal. Postcranial features. Apart from the first evidence of Bowley, a rest of classical Neanderthals walked erect, similar to humans. That is, they had perfect bipedalism. With erect posture. Secondly, all the forearm bones, hand bones, were more robust than Neanderthal, than Homo sapiens, than Homo sapiens. According to Bowley, Neanderthal had, in general, heavy build compared to sapiens. According to the archaeologist Trincans, the heavy build must have been helpful in conserving body heat, in the colder regions, right in the brackets. But occurrence of Neanderthal fossils with the same build in the tropical and sub-Saharan regions raises a question. Right to the next point. Pelvic cavity is much larger, indicating more developed individuals being born. Bowley tried to guess the gestation period of Neanderthal at about 10 to 12 months. An interesting biological fact, especially about classical Neanderthal, was his shorter lifespan, that is about 40 years. Reasons for which are still not established. Come to the next one, that is progressive Neanderthal or Mount Carmel man. He differed from the classical variant in skull features alone. starting from the first evidence in Palestine in 1931-32, archaeologists could confirm the following skull features. Firstly, cranial capacity of 1400 cc. Cranial capacity of 1400 cc. The orbits being more rounded than Neanderthal, nearing than Homo erectus, nearing humans. Thirdly, compared to classical Neanderthal, very feebly developed supraorbital torus. But it is unlike humans. Right in the brackets. Humans are devoid of a continuous bony formation. They have the ridge being broken or separated. With the root of the nasal bone. Continue writing in the brackets. Such a characteristic one can find in the early Homo sapiens fossils. Such as Chanceled, CHANCELED, Chanceled man. Bracket close. There is a less elongated skull. Compared to classical Neanderthal. Continue writing there. Compared to classical Neanderthal, less broader nose, and less massive lower jaw. But compared to humans, the mandible is heavier. Compared to humans, mandible is heavier, though possessing evidence of a chin. When compared to classical Neanderthal, right in the next point, when compared to classical Neanderthal, The facial muscular attachments, the facial muscular attachments are less pronounced, are less pronounced. Continue writing that. With regard to placing Neanderthal in the human evolutionary line, got complicated due to number one, the variants within Neanderthal, secondly, certain skull features providing a challenge against the established ideas of evolution. That is, the higher cranial capacity than Homo sapiens. Continue writing there. Paul Broca's analysis, Paul-Broca, we have used this name in the previous class. Paul Broca's analysis comparing Homo sapiens with Neanderthal refers to, write in the course, in percentage terms or in relative terms, the forebrain of Neanderthal is smaller than sapiens, which might indicate that articulating abilities of Neanderthal could be on a lesser side despite larger brain. This, according to Trinkan, must be the reason for a successful species of Homo sapiens compared to Neanderthal that had to extinct when both of them were coexisting. Right aside here. Cultural features of Neanderthal. Culturally, he belonged to the Middle Paleolithic times, and practiced flake tool culture, along with the scrapers, hafting, and Levalloisian tools. The habitational sites across the world, proved his cave living, and living in rock shelters. The existence of Neanderthal fossils in different environments led to questions of his mode of food getting. The differential environment also presents diversity in the use of clothing, tool evidences such as needles in Europe indicate producing clothes, though fossilized cloth evidence is inconclusive. Sir, I am not giving the elaboration of tools and all. You have already done in the Middle Paleolithic. You will be taking it from there. Keep writing there. One of common areas of discussion, that is language in culture, is also interpreted from the facial skeleton, but such an effort was only based on an imagination. Keep writing there. Beginning from erectus, when man indulged in group hunting, archaeologists have been putting efforts to prove the beginnings of a formal language the beginnings of a formal language. Right in the next paragraph. Another issue of controversy was disappearance of Neanderthal. It is believed that Neanderthal disappeared about 3,500 to 4,500 years ago. For reasons such as, number one, being wiped out by the migration of more advanced Homo sapiens. Secondly, a gradual evolution into Homo sapiens, right in the brackets, strongly supported by the archaeologist Brosse, B-R-O-S-E. Close the bracket. The opponents cite the parallel presence of evidences of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens. Thirdly, with the two parallelly existing species depending on the same sources of nourishment, the more evolved could grab more resources with the other gradually disappearing. Fourthly, the time periods of about 35,000 to 45,000 years ago, was time of quickly changing climates and the Western European regions where Neanderthal inhabited got into extreme cold climates, and he, failing to move out, must have eliminated him. Right in the next paragraph. Currently, with regard to Homo erectus, there is a larger consensus. Of it being the ancestor of sapiens. But Neanderthal, full stop, but Neanderthal is still an unresolved riddle. Full stop. Riddle, R-I-D-D-L-E. So there are a few places which I will be sharing with you. You can add them to your write-up. I tried to give the details there about each of those sites. Like Shanidar, etc. This you will receive. You can study them, categorize them, memorize them, and present in the exam.
Another issue was raised in Nepal. It was believed that he disappeared around November
3,000 కాదు మాస్టర్ కాదు 35 under the time when my grandfather lived, so it's not 3,500, it's not 35,000. So those are the sites that you will be doing from there. I was telling you in the last class that you have 3 other fellows. You can look into your book number 3. There are about 2.5-3 pages there about Homo sapiens. Third booklet. Index में देखिए Homo sapiens somewhere 25, 26. Some bit of pictures are also there, and some write-up on Homo sapiens, who, what they found. In some of the cases, we were talking about a old man's fossil. In one species, we find 9 different skeletons were found, both sexes, all ages, kind of things. And one of the fossils we found in the red ochre, indicating that maybe some kind of mummification, some kind of activity on the corpus was happening. You can go through those details and enjoy the skulls there. One is having a pentagonal skull, one is having a bulbous forehead, one other is having another variant. These are our own very near ancestors. I thought I would talk a bit about one last topic there, so that I can gracefully end it with something that is very contemporary. That is a discipline called ethnoarchaeology. I'll give you a brief idea about it. Somewhere in your material, I have actually added a full-fledged document on this that runs into about 6 or 7 pages. And I tried to give a table also, a flow chart also, what all things come into ethnoarchaeology. But then I knew very clearly that later you would come back to talk about it, so I thought I would finish it there, here itself. It's something like this. Some people call ethnoarchaeology as new archaeology also. See, ethnoarchaeology is one type of cultural materialism, meaning that some time back in anthropological thought, when a question was asked, cultural materialism, at that point we mentioned to you that you should be writing about white or child, and then you'll also be writing about Marvin Harris, kind of this small list that we have given. These are all the people who were studying culture from the material perspective. And in that group we had one person called Gordon Childe, who was an archaeologist, who was studying material. From there he was trying to build a story. So among all those people, we had actually given a very high status to Gordon Childe in cultural materialism. Now I am saying here once again that ethnoarchaeology is a type of cultural materialism, meaning that when you are answering that question, this should also be added there. This is also one reason I told you in one of the classes that the answer that you will be writing in the first 10-15 days will be very much different from what you will be writing later. So there are different definitions. Generally it occurs in our discipline that for the same term you try to give several definitions based on how you feel and what you feel. So ethnoarchaeology is like studying the cultures with the material aspects. Ethnoarchaeology is studying the cultures of the previous societies, with the material remains. This was one early definition. Studying the early cultures with the material remains. When we say material, it can be of different kinds. Like in archaeology we had seen, material can be of different kinds. It may be artifacts, it may be biofacts, or it may be landscapes, etc., etc. But the focus of ethnoarchaeology is the artifacts alone. The focus of ethnoarchaeology is artifacts. That means how you are using the tools, and through tools how you are communicating with the rest of the people. You will have to understand the spirit of it closely. I am pushing you a little harder here. I am sorry for that, but it's the last leg there. There's a subtle difference. Suppose we are generally calling archaeology, you are trying to study material and try to write a culture history. When it comes to ethnoarchaeology, among the various definitions, one of them says that it uses material as a process that is involved in communication. When they are saying that communication is how you are actually interacting with the other members in the community. But the definition takes the other extreme also. As one of the thinkers writes, ethnoarchaeology is actually studying the material of the Esther societies and what they want to communicate to us. Meaning that they have left some evidence for us. It's as simple as some of the culture groups, they preserve the wealth, whether it could be a material wealth, a belief system wealth, whatever it could be. They preserve it in such a way that the future generations would understand them. They will not be existing to explain to the future generations why exactly they were doing something. Whatever remains they are leaving for the future generations, it is actually to explain, to communicate to the future generations that it is what we are. Are you getting what I'm saying? It is not simply writing culture history of the past societies. That is one way of doing things, but actually what they believe is the past is trying to talk to you through the material remains. Something like that interstellar thing. Certain light years ago, they have left some evidence for you, and then you go and find out that evidence and reach out to the people who are there light years away from you. I mean, if at all you understand that, you would understand this. అది అర్థం కాదు, ఇది అర్థం కాదు. తెల్లోడు బాగా రాస్తాడు అంటే కథలు రాసినప్పుడు. It's not the same traditional kind of a stuff. But then you see, it's like this. A question that we generally expect in the exam is, where exactly India is in ethno-archaeology? We are actually busy trying to find some evidence of the past. Bhattacharya says, when he was writing in 1980 itself, he says that archaeology in the rest of the world has moved far ahead than where we are. For them, the discipline had become almost a science, where they are trying to bring to life whatever must have happened ages ago. See, in the previous documentary that we had seen, we saw them trying to have a skit of Homo erectus that looks to be childish if at all you see them shooting. But once everything happened and all that animation was ready, this was actually to communicate to the rest of the world that, see, this is what we believe is about Homo erectus. So it may be a small tool, but the tool, the way he was manufacturing and the way he was writing things on it, writing in the sense, it may be drawing of the holes, it may be some kind of an art form that he is making on that artifact. It all is a mechanism of expressing his ideas. When you say that he is communicating with others, it is actually trying to express with the others. So it's like, art forms in the Paleolithic or the Mesolithic times, the art forms are a communication. So ethno-archaeology is trying to study these kind of things to see how man was expressing himself. I hope you are following what I am saying. So according to Bhattacharya, we are still to evolve in that particular way of studying archaeology. So it is like trying to pick up various things from different disciplines of anthropology, especially there is one here. Somebody was writing this title, Archaeology as Anthropology, meaning that if at all an archaeologist is using ethnological evidence to reconstruct the past, if he is using ethnological evidence to reconstruct the past, that becomes ethno-archaeology. I try to redo the thing that I have said so far. Traditionally, what archaeology is, you have seen. Ethno-archaeology has invited different definitions. One of the definitions is that it is using the material to study the history. It is using the material to see how they communicated. The communication must have been within their own community or within their own culture group at that point of time, or maybe it is a way of communicating with the future generations. And then some people believe, and this is a popular definition now, ethno-archaeology is using ethnology to reconstruct the past, meaning that you are trying to add the ethnological detail to the material that you are gathering. Meaning that you are trying to add flesh to the skeleton. You found a tool, but then this tool can be explained only if you have some kind of an ethnological evidence. You know very well, if only those populations are alive, you will be in a position to build a credible story by talking to them. If they were not alive, this tool cannot be explained. So there are certain examples we will be quoting where we find that some of the communities, like there are some Eskimo groups that still are using the same kind of tools that were found in the people who were beyond the so-called history. So whatever prehistoric tools were there, if they are still using, you would be talking to them and see how they are using, why they are using, the techniques that they are using in manufacturing and putting the things to practice. If you are talking to those kind of people who are using the tools that were used prehistorically, it may be some kind of a continuation there. I hope you are understanding what I am saying. It is a rarity. But definitely, sir, suppose you want to study certain societies that must have existed, say, a few thousands of years ago. What can be, suppose I am considering Indian subcontinent itself, what can be the material or the tool that you might pick up to say that we are using, or some of the contemporary groups are using, way back people have also used, so I can consider this as something to initiate my ethno-archaeological discussion. और बताएं any material, any tool or anything of that kind which some of the groups are still using. Long time back Homo sapiens had used needles. Sir? Jewelry. Shells, okay. Spears or bows, arrows. There are several communities still using. See, the interesting thing is, many times until somebody practically uses certain contemporary things to understand the past, till then we don't understand that, okay, this can be the way of looking at things. When some of the Eskimo practices, some of the pygmy Central African populations were studied from that perspective. I mean, those were the works taken up by several American anthropologists who first initiated their studies from Red Indian populations. See, it's a different thing. What is history for us is different from what is history for them. Generally, Indians claim that we have a very long history. Like, even before the origin of history, we had a long history. But for them, history is very, very short. Some structure that was about 150 years is a historical marvel for them. For us, just you walk on the streets of Hyderabad, you find structures which were more than 400 or 500 years old. But for their poorer souls, that 150 years of structure is a historical one which they try to preserve it and propagate it. For us, every structure is almost a fossil. We have been living in that for several centuries. So we don't value it. So the problem which the Westerners identify, which Bhattacharya also identifies in India, is we have so much of ethnological information, but we are not applying it for the archaeological studies, and that's where is the gap coming. I hope you are following what I am saying. So what these people are trying to do, the so-called ethno-archaeologists, is they are trying to introduce newer techniques of using archaeological information. They are trying to dovetail it with the existing ethnological data. So you should know what is the material that was of the past, what is the technique that was of the past, still in use today. So it is very much different from the traditional functionalistic approach or evolutionistic approach. This is actually trying to apply some kind of observation, some kind of first-hand information. So it's like I am actually trying to write a story of the society that is not existing now, but they must have left certain techniques which are still followed in that area by certain groups. So what I am trying to do is, in a way, indirectly, I am trying to get a first-hand data from the people who are still following that kind of technique in current times. So it is another variant of first-hand information that they are trying to follow. So it's a combination there. You see first the evidence of a material, and in order to get a confirmation, in order to get a credible data, you would be adding non-material data there. You'll write something, then it will be much more clear. Keep writing. Ethno-archaeology. Ethno-archaeology, which is otherwise called new archaeology. New archaeology is an ethnographic approach, to study the contemporary living human societies and seeks to identify the behavioral aspects that structures the archaeological data. It is the study of social organizations and other ethnological features of the present day societies on the basis of material culture in order to draw conclusions about the past societies from the material remains. It is in a way presenting an analysis of social structure, from the ethnological information gathered through primary resource collection from the contemporary societies, but the objective being a reconstruction of social and historical elements of the people who used similar material culture in the past. Right in the next paragraph. Traditionally, archaeology was concerned with identification, classification, and chronological ordering of material. They were able to describe civilizations with the help of artifacts full stop. For ethnoarchaeologists, the purpose of studying artifacts is not simply to write culture history, but it is to understand the behavior of man in early times, and how he tried communicating things within his own group and with the future generations. Right in the next paragraph. An interest in such kind of studies was initiated by Louis Binford. You have heard this name earlier also. Louis Binford, who defined ethnoarchaeology as a combination of ethnology and archaeology. According to him, an archaeologist shall not restrict himself to the stone and bone assemblages, but he should incorporate ethnological data for the better understanding of past cultures. In 1978, he studied a Red Indian population, that is the name, Nunamiut Red Indians, comparing the way they disposed of the consumed animal remains, and tried to compare with the past cultures. Similar approach of material use, hunting, food consumption, among Eskimos and Neanderthal was taken up by Bowley. Right in the next paragraph. Similar to the behavioral studies in culture personality, American anthropology initiated understanding behavior from the material that later was called ethnoarchaeology. Such a method to be applied in the field one should have a continuation of material use and ideologies across generations. Such a practice can be found among several tribal and rural communities in Indian subcontinent. Hence for Bhattacharya, India is better equipped to develop its own variant of ethnoarchaeology than any other region. But the Indian archaeology has still not initiated the process of combining ethnology with archaeology. Continue writing in the next paragraph. Ethnoarchaeologists, according to William Rathé, explore how conscious and subconscious human behavior imposes itself on the cultures external and material. He had initiated a project called Tuscan that aimed at studying garbage in different culture groups to understand culture and behavior. Though this study was comparative among different contemporary cities and culture groups, a similar method was later used across the culture groups of different times. They tried to study the kind of food the culture groups gathered or produced, the volume of production, the volume of consumption, and the volumes that are wasted. I don't know how many of you at your own homes get indulged in the buying of grocery for the household. So you can actually compare. I think Even the young fellows, irrespective of gender, can now indulge in. When Shah Rukh Khan himself is doing the big basket thing, anybody can, you can, for your own understanding, indulge in this act for a couple of months and see in the household. Your mother would be more than happy that you are accompanying her, thinking that you are full in love with her. But then you go to see how much of food is actually, what kind of food you are purchasing. Sometimes what happens is you purchase maybe for a fashion. It may not be that it's a utility for you, or you're not used to it, but then you are purchasing because your neighbor is purchasing. You're actually not using it. And also just peep into your refrigerator. How many weeks or how many months the food is being stored there. Sometimes some food is there just like that. I mean, you're not using it. It may not be simply about the food, but even the other articles. That's the reason why that fellow, quicker. How many days you might be having some articles that you're not using actually. OLX or whatever. You must have purchased the thread milk because the neighbor was purchasing. Or maybe you wanted to show off to your visitors that, see, I have this, I'm using it. You must not have dusted it for years. But then it is lying out there. These actually speak about the behavior of the individuals and the members in the culture groups. That's what is that. Actually, if you had read Mesolithic Europe, a short note that was added to your material, I asked you to go through. If you haven't gone through so far, open the page right now. We'll do the ribbon cutting. Open the page, European Mesolithic. In the European Mesolithic, manam రాయలేదది. We did not write that in the class. I asked you to do it katakata. No, mana paristhiti ela undante. So very unfortunate that we don't know what we are writing, what we have to read from the material. There is something called European Mesolithic. Several variants I have given. Towards the end of that list, I have added something called earth ball culture. Can somebody read those two lines? Earth ball culture. And then there is something else called kitchen midden culture. There you are actually studying the kind of food that goes waste, or the kind of food that got fossilized. So you study the garbage there. It's like your garbage is the indication of your personality. Your garbage is the indication of your personality. Premam hai na? 60 beer bottles being sold within so many days of a week. So per day, how many they must be consuming in the room? You can have your own analysis. Aaj aap room jao, kitne bottles hain? Just check out. You know the consumption levels. How many you yourself are consuming? How many you are offering to your guest? We go by the principle for the visitors. Even if there is no food, it's okay, but bottles must be there. Food he can get, but bottles you should offer, so that the thick friendship would flourish. This is a behavioral trait. That's what is being studied in kitchen ball culture. Kitchen midden culture. So sir, that's what I was telling. If I had asked you to read something back home, at least respect the word, open the book, give a glance, And just in case in the future, if we are going back to talk about it, you should know that we have spoken of this in the class. In certain batches, the numbers are intimidating of the kind of dangerous scripts. After yesterday's test, a couple of scripts that were, I think 7 or 8 were uploaded. I had that gracious opportunity of getting that intimidating feeling. So I thought I should open my heart and talk to you. Students were actually asking me to show the good scripts, but I would want to do the other way around. Students were asking me to show which are the scripts that are too good and we should write in that particular way. But I wanted to show certain scripts to say that this is not the way you should be writing. I think what not to do has to be first known to you rather than telling you what has to be done. What has to be done, I have been telling you in the class. What has to be done, I have been telling you in the class. What has not, and after I have started your batch yesterday, I did not sleep for a minute also. And throughout when I was coming to the class, I was constantly thinking about this. To beg you, saying that don't put me to shame at any point of time. It's actually not me, it's you who is failing. And I think the topics were also not very tough. Can you tell me one question from yesterday's test? Day before yesterday's test, Saturday? Ma? Cultural materialism was there. Huh? And if you could notice, I did not repeat even a single question from the previous test. If at all you had seen the previous paper, if at all we had seen the previous paper, if not attempted, I wanted to see to it that you get a maximum number of questions that are fresh. What was the question from archaeology that I had added? Oh, I am so very happy. That is how things will be. But then when you are going to write the archaeology test, I thought I should make it cumulative. Meaning that right from your thought, you should be once again doing the whole thing, and so that I can give not simply a 250 marker, but maybe a 300 mark test, something like that. You are writing something there. Garbage studies. So you better go this month to grocery purchase and see what you are wasting. You make a proper account. How much of each of the quantity you have purchased. Sometimes what happens is we are simply putting it there, taking it from the shop display and putting it there. You don't even think whether you will be using it or not. So this month, maybe a couple of months, you try to make an account how much of it you are wasting. And from there you can have a behavioral assessment of your own self. Whether you are somebody who is a utilitarian or somebody who is doing things for the sake of the others. So you have written the last sentence there. They tried to study the kind of food the culture groups gathered or produced, the volume of food produced, the volume consumed, and the volumes that are wasted. Such a method of study was formerly used in the analysis of Mesolithic cultures in Europe. William Rathe, in Arizona region, studied garbage carefully, studied urban garbage carefully, sorted out in the laboratory, to analyze people's preferences, culture of consumption, and disposal of the waste, using traditional archaeological methods, and ethnoarchaeology, he tried to understand consumption patterns of Red Indian communities in the vicinity. Such urban behaviors are currently being extended. Such urban behavioral studies are currently being extended to the garbage studies, in the civilizations of Central America. Right in the next paragraph. This kind of study, which is an American anthropological invention, can be traced back to the post-World War II time, that was marked by mishandling of archaeological sites, that led to discontent among archaeologists. In 1960s, several models were suggested to make ethnoarchaeology a scientific discipline that aims at number one, reconstruction of cultural history, secondly, confirming cultural past, and thirdly, understanding cultural processes. Right in the next paragraph. Ethnoarchaeologists such as William Rathé and Louis Binford did not subscribe to the idea of diffusionism. The idea of diffusionism based on culture center approach. For them, cultures are not shared entities. They are the processes in which people participate as the inventors of the material, or the users of the material, According to them, the goal of archaeology has to be to study the processes involved with the material, Cluckhorn during 1950s used the term new archaeology and defines it as archaeology as what an ethnologist does. According to him, the material in the digs has the capability of communicating. Material in the digs has a capability of communicating the entire cultural milieu to the archaeologist. Entire cultural milieu to the archaeologist. MELIEU. To the archaeologist. For him, material remains. Keep the past cultures still alive, waiting for the explorer to decipher them. Daniel Stiley called such an understanding as living archaeology. He defined it as studying past from the archaeological perspective of the material, based on a verbal communication, about the artifacts with the direct participants or the descendants of direct participants. Read that statement to yourself. Living archaeology is with the help of verbal communication with the direct participants or the descendants of direct participants. Keep writing there. Such an approach was used by Franz Boas, though the discipline of ethnoarchaeology was still not discussed. Boas studied masks, M-A-S-K, masks and totem pillars among different Eskimo communities in the contemporary times. Interestingly for him, the materials he picked up for study had been in use for several generations. The Tuscan project, TUSCON, ఇక్కడ రాశారు కొన్ని యుగాల క్రితం. The Tuscan project is currently aiming at giving a structure to the discipline of ethnoarchaeology and providing models so that in different parts of the world, archaeologists can identify the material being used across generations and conduct ethnological surveys conduct ethnological surveys, comma, apply comparisons cross-culturally and cross-temporally to provide an understanding of cultures and processes that might disappear if left unattended. This was the last paragraph in today's newspaper. These findings are just a sample. Many of the other rock formations and burial sites have been disturbed or destroyed by the people living nearby so that they can cultivate their land. We have to carry out our excavations quickly, as I don't think any of these sites will be allowed to remain in their present status. So it's like the sense of urgency, that's what is found by ethno-archaeologists. That's where I close the topic for the day. Tomorrow is going to be a new day. I am still not announcing. I might be starting with race, or I might be starting with caste. So that in both the cases you relax a bit. Have a good time. And you finish your so after 30 classes, today you had done Neanderthal, and I had asked you to do Homo erectus. So for Neanderthal, you are largely depending on your class. I had asked you to do Homo sapiens from your printed note AN03. And a brief account is given of ethno-archaeology. You will be studying it along with one of the printed documents that will come to you. So I am planning to put it in the book 4. If that book will take time, I might circulate this in your soft copy, ethno-archaeology. So have a good time, sir.